He breathed into her nostrils and she came alive. She was so beautiful and looked exactly as he had wanted. He was so happy and confident that no one would suspect that anything was wrong. Once upon a time, in a beautiful African village where people took pride in getting married and enjoyed having families of their own, there was a man who wasn't as happy as other villagers. He had plenty cattle, sheep, and goats, but one thing was still lacking in his life that made him deeply sad. He was getting much older, and yet he could not find himself a wife or even start a family of his own. Everyone his age had already gotten married, and he wondered what was wrong with him. I'm rich and healthy. Why can't I find a wife? He always thought to himself. He had even come to the conclusion that it was because he was an old man. No family wanted to allow an older man like him marry their daughters when there were several other rich, handsome, young and eligible bachelors seeking for their hands in marriage. One day, he was walking down the valley by the river and said to himself, I really must find myself a wife, or I shall be getting too old. But what can I do? Then he sat down beside the river to think and meditate. After a while, he got an idea. On the other bank of the river, there was a large tree with beautiful green leaves on it. He looked at the tree and said, Aha! Supposing I take that tree and carve myself a statue of a beautiful young woman. Since he couldn't think of any other realistic and better option, he made up his mind that he was going to do exactly that. He took his axe and carving tools and began carving the statue. He carved the image of a very beautiful young woman with lovely features that matched the exact kind of woman he had always wanted. After he had finished carving the statue of the woman of his dreams, she looked so beautiful that he breathed into her nostrils, touched her eyes, and at once she came alive. He was startled and couldn't believe his eyes. Ah! He screamed with extreme joy. Here's my wife at last. He kept dancing out of excitement. He had longed for a wife for so long, and finally, he miraculously got the type of wife he had always desired. After his excitement had died down a bit, he calmed down and thought of what to do now that he had a wife to avoid the suspicion of the villagers. Then he said to her, You must never tell anyone where you come from. If anyone should ask you, you must just say, I am Camille, Camille of the river. Repeat what I said. I am Camille, Camille of the river. After they had finished memorizing the best replies, he then took her home. He gave her the married woman's head ring to wear, an apron, beautiful clothes, jewelries, and beads. She lacked nothing because he gave her everything she wanted and even more. She was such a good wife to him, and they lived very happily together at his home. The villagers wondered, how did this old man manage to get a wife? And each time they would ask where she had came from, she would simply say, I am Camille, Camille of the river. Though they were confused, a lot of people still envied him. Both young and old men could not stand the fact that he had such a beautiful wife. His wife was in fact the most beautiful in the village. They wondered where he could get a woman that beautiful to marry. Now, one day, some young men who weren't from the village walked past his house, and they saw Camillo and said, How can such an old man have such a beautiful young wife? It's not right. We will take her away to our own village." So they caught her and took her away to their own village on the other side of the hill. Her husband was very sad that these strong men had taken away his wife, and he wondered what he could do. The village she was taken to was well known for being troublemakers. They loved to start wars over nothing, and his village was not exactly in good terms with them. There was no way he would go to their village alone to get his wife, because he knew it would be impossible to defeat them by himself and take her. Also, he didn't want a war to start because of that, and wondered how his wife was being treated. Was she even being treated fairly and nice? Then he had an idea. He had 2 pigeons, and he called them to him and said, "My pigeons, you will fly for me across the hill to the village where they have taken my wife, and you shall sing her a song I will teach you, and then you will bring me back her apron." So the 2 pigeons learned the song, flew across the hill, landed on the fence around the yard where the lady was held prisoner by the young men, and then they started singing. "Camille, Camille, we are sent by your husband. Camille, Camille, he said we must come here. Camille, Camille, and bring him your apron, your apron." Now, when the young men heard the pigeons singing, they said, "All right, give them your apron. We have plenty more. All we want is you." So she gave the pigeons her apron, and they flew back with it to her husband. The next day, the husband said to the pigeons, "Today you must go and ask for her head ring." So they flew over the hill, landed on the fence again, and sang, "Camille, Camille, we are sent by your husband. Camille, Camille, he said we must come here. Camille, Camille, and bring him your head ring." The young men then said to her, "Give them the head ring. We don't even want it. We want only you." So she gave the pigeons her head ring, and they flew back again. Each day the pigeons flew across the hill and asked her for something else, for everything she had, until finally the husband said, "Now, my pigeons, you must go and ask for her life." So the pigeons flew back once more. This time they landed on her lap as she sat outside the hut, and they sang, "Camille, Camille, we were sent by your husband. Camille, Camille, he said we must come here. Camille, Camille, and bring him your life, your life." And as they sang, they both pecked at her eyes, and immediately Camille turned back into a statue. First, her feet fell away, and then her legs, then her arms fell away, and last of all, her body rolled slowly down the slope, all the way down to the river. And the moment it touched the water, she turned back into a tree and put out green leaves again. And that is where Camille has been ever since to this day. The moral of this story is, number 1, do not envy anyone you do not know how they got to where they are today. Those young men never knew how the old man managed to get his new wife, but they were so envious of him. They never knew that his new wife was actually a statue. So when they got his wife, she didn't last long in their hands because she went back the same way she came. The second lesson is, with enough faith in you, you can actually turn your dreams into reality. That's what a lot of people do not know. If you put in a lot of effort, you can actually turn that thing, that little idea you have inside of you, it can actually come true because of your efforts and your faith in yourself. The third lesson is stop wanting other people's possessions or properties. Just generally anything that belongs to another person, you shouldn't be wanting it or even going to the extent of trying to grab it for yourself. And this can actually be applicable to, let me say, people who envy someone else because of maybe his wife or her husband, and then you see young girls going after people's husbands or young men going after people's wives. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on the notification for more African folk tales like this, African stories, cultural insights about Africa. And then sometimes we are going to be discussing about the problems surrounding the Black community and Africa as a whole. Don't forget, stay tuned to this channel and expect more. Bye.